Welcome everyone, and today we're taking you to the streets to find out the issues that slavery have on the contemporary Caribbean today.
Do you consider society to be a patriarchal one?
Not really.
Why? Why?
This would be because we see women more taking a lead role in society where they're not allowing normally gender-related roles to stop them from doing certain things. So you don't see women shying away from certain jobs that we all saw as male-dominated, like construction workers, engineers, and so we see women taking the lead.
How should slavery impacted the Caribbean?
Well, personally, I think it forms a great part of our legacy as the Caribbean people. And it gives us a sense, or helps us, helps us identify who we are, where we stand in the world, and how is it that we ought to develop and where we ought to go with our future. So it puts us in context essentially. So that's how I think it has impacted the Caribbean.
Do you think that race
Really?
affects job availability in the Caribbean?
I don't really think race affects job availability. I just think it affects the jobs that you would get. Say for instance, have you ever been to Scotia? Everybody has been to Scotia. I realize that almost all the tellers are light skinned. So you don't normally see a dark skinned teller there. And other than that, there are certain positions that you'll not see like a dark skin or like an Asian person. Even though the Caribbean is like this huge melting pot for all these cultures, there are just certain places that you would not see a certain skin toned person. I don't want to say race because you're so skin.
So why has it
put much influence on differentiating gender roles?
Well, it's a very complex question, but a very timely one, I must say. I believe it's because I think coming from way back, people have realized that certain gender have more affinity towards getting certain things done. So for me personally, I think that women are a bit better at multitasking. So you'd always look at a woman to be a bit more dealing with certain things. So even in rearing children, women are more nurturing than men are. So therefore we would more look at it and say that the woman would be the person that would really take care of the children more. Not saying that a man can't, but the truth is that if you look at it, women are more nurturing in that sense. Men are geared towards being more physical and getting more aggressive with certain things. So you look at it and say more technical.
Do you think the European culture affects the Caribbean educational system?
Well, to an extent.
Why?
Because we see where the curriculum was European based before, where they used to do the GCE, the A-levels, O-levels, but now we're moving to things like CAPE and CSEC, which is mostly Caribbean based. It shows Caribbean books that affects our identity, our culture, that impacts us, that shapes us. But at the same time, we still kind of have some European books like Shakespeare and Freeform, which we do for literature. So even though we are moving away from the European culture and the European educational system, we're not fully there as yet, because we still have things like books that they use to reflect their Renaissance period and that thing that impacts our culture.
Slave driver, time is catching up on you. Oh, slave driver.
After the long journey through the Middle Passage, the Africans who were able to survive the misery, rape, and diseases were brought to the Caribbean through a dehumanizing process referred to as slavery by the Europeans. At that time, the Europeans had a high demand for sugar, which required a large and able labor force. Upon arrival, the slaves were escorted to the plantation by the slave master and his wife. The slaves are ruled by the slave master, his wife, and oftentimes a few black overseers. This was done to instill fear in the slaves and force them to lose trust in their own kind. Africans were brought to cultivate sugarcane, which was then transported to Europe and sold in the form of sugar. Enslaved people performed many tasks, one of them being fieldwork. The lighter-skinned persons were subjected to housework, while the darker-skinned persons were given field labor. Men and women weren't allowed to be together based on their own free will, and if caught, they were whipped and sent to their separate respective quarters.
Went down to the river Jordan, where John baptized 3. When I walked the devil in hell, says Johnny baptized me. I say roll, Jordan, roll. Oh, now roll,
slaves owned. During the times of slavery, men were seen as breeders, and so both genders were brought together by slave masters to procreate and increase the number of slaves owned. This was done in order to continue the slave legacy, as the importation of slaves from West Africa ended in 1806. Some slave masters would forcefully have sex with both genders, spreading diseases among slaves and impregnating many females. Individuals would be reluctant to participate, but they didn't have a choice, as disobedience would result in whipping or further punishment. This was done as a way to emasculate men and forcing them to submit. Sex between slave masters and female slaves resulted in persons of lighter complexion, known as mulattoes. This later led to issues such as colorism and a divisible social structure. Many slaves received manumission, and eventually slavery was abolished in 1838. Even after slavery ended, there were still effects being seen, especially in the education, religion, family life, and government systems. Some may argue that there are still mental slaves today.
Since them are on, so carry we go home, I bring we run a east, well, come on a Rasta.
So to what extent can the Caribbean be considered a patriarchal society?
To some extent, not really a great extent, because from back then up until now, women were always seen as the head of the household. But however, men were the one that kind of top the jobs then. So for CEO, you wouldn't find a woman being a CEO. For business, it's always men, you know. But as it relates to households, it's just always women.
Women taking care of children, women taking care of, you know,
Taking care of the
cooking.
husband.
Actually, we are the head of the whole, we're the head of the household, but you know, the men, because they want to pay the bills or whatever. But
That's the thing. I get what you're saying, but that's the thing. If you're the breadwinner, you're the person that is putting income into the house, doesn't that make you the head of the household? So
but you're not taking care of the laundry, you're not taking care of the
You're the
children, you're not
provider
doing
of the
nothing right
You're
there.
not the one mainly.
But
on
you
top
have
of that.
females now being
Rising
the
up,
providers.
exactly.
And they're taking care of the
And I
children.
feel this mentality comes from slavery, back when the men were put on the field doing the hard work and whatever, and then they just put the females in the house to be breeders and those stuff. So it kind of comes down to us as we being in the house and the men being out there, and so we perceptualize that as being men, you know, dominating. But not anymore though, because we're making the cash.
But things and times have changed, Andre. Females are doing
We
more
are
work
rising.
than men.
We're actually
rising.
doing more than men because we're able to be the breadwinners and still take care of the family.
So how do you think chattel slavery has impacted the Caribbean? I feel like it's even like to the first question, back to the first question, it has made this like illusion or perception that men are the breadwinners because of how the black men worked hard on the cane field. You know what I'm saying?
that must be mentally disheartening though, because imagine being a chattel slave means that you are owned by that person.
Yeah.
Being owned is not something that as a human, like, they didn't even treat you like a human, you were animals back then. So that themselves are putting down like a strain physically, emotionally, and mentally
Especially on that race.
On
and
that
I think
race.
that ties into.
And even how like the male and the females weren't allowed to be together. So like you weren't allowed to get married, you weren't allowed to fall in love. Like they only put them together when they wanted to build the labor force. And you see that happening now because the male, they're not really in committed relationships. They just go around laying their seeds, having their children, and that's it. Like they're not really taking care of their children, and it linked back to slavery because that was what they used to do during those periods.
And like back then, even though they were forced to do it now, it's kind of like this mental thing. So I still believe that men are mental slaves because they have the ideology that, oh, like I have a child with this lady, but it was her choice to keep that child. I didn't tell her to keep it, so why do I need to take care of it?
Come and go in and out, you know.
let me just say, you realize the ratio of men to women. Yo, give me a minute. Somebody come back, man. Just wait.
But from a male
Alright, here we are, man. Here we are.
I was saying from a male's perspective, you can look at it where they weren't used to being in committed relationships. They were used to a polygamous lifestyle.
500 years of that.
No, but it's progressed now to where it's named progressive monogamy. So instead of having more than one wife, they have more than families. So they weren't used to being with one person.
Yeah, so that's the African culture.
Being
Yeah.
retained in the
Yeah.
Caribbean.
From the moment the Europeans put us on that ship through the Middle Passage, we were owned by them. They put this superiority on us. So they were always seen as the superior race. They were better. They consider themselves to be better than us. We are. So for example, the ground that they walk on, we weren't important, and it's still happening today.
The ground that they walk on.
But I mean, it doesn't only affect the absenteeism of fathers, because if you look around, like, you have families that are nuclear. So you have parents that have been together for like 15 years, 20 years, not being married.
So a lot of common law unions.
There are a lot of common law unions, yes, but this whole religion that came to the Caribbean from the Europeans, which was another means in which they controlled us. Because after slavery, they were like, no man, we need something else to control these people. And because we came out of these rough times, they said, all right, we're going to be subtle. Religion
and education.
Yeah, religion and education. So the Roman Catholics came from the Europeans, and that's where I think that's where the whole marriage and the whole they even pushed more for the men being the heads.
It also has influenced colorism.
Colorism would be the prejudice against people of a darker skin tone. It's pretty prevalent in our society today with the problem we have in Jamaica in terms of bleaching and in terms of job discrimination, where people with lighter skin are favored above people with darker skin. Scotiabank.
You have never seen a dark skin teller at Scotia, like all the tellers at Scotia.
And like if you see them, it's like one dark skin and like 5 brownies.
And even if you see a dark skinned person, like their hair texture is like
Indian or mixed.
You know? And the bad thing about this is that you can't prove to a court of law that it's discrimination. It's a free market and businesses have the ability to hire whoever they want on the basis that they're good enough for this job or better than any of the other applicants. You can't prove that your skin tone has anything to do with that, not definitively, which is the, how they get away with it and how it keeps continuing. The skin bleaching can be traced back to slavery, obviously, with the white hierarchy, where the lighter skin you were, the further up in society you could move. Therefore, being brown was to be desired.
And also in chattel slavery, the lighter skinned people had the less, like,
easier jobs.
Yeah, they had the easier jobs, and then the darker people had like the
field work,
labor
labor gang.
But skin bleaching isn't really the only causation of skin bleaching. Wouldn't be just colorism. It's a part of identity. When the Africans came here, they had to leave their identity in Africa and indoctrinated. Most of what they indoctrinated was from the British, so they didn't really get the chance to carry their identity because the slaves from West Africa came from many different parts of Africa. So that's how the Caribbean and whole became this melting pot where it became so diverse in when it comes to identity and stuff like that. So we don't have any one definitive identity. Our identity is really mixed from a lot of different races, and so it's also a part of identity, I think.
But probably skin bleaching has something to do with self-esteem also, because our black skin was synonymous with hatred, because it is what caused us to be beaten and abused by these white people. So it has something to do with self-esteem also.
But yeah, but it has something to do with self-esteem. But if we had a more concrete foundation of where our identity came from, the self-esteem wouldn't be there. We know that this is who we are, and we will be rooted in that. It's just like when we're in the class, when we're in the foundation class, and Miss asked us about the Barbie dolls. Majority of us were grown in such a way where we nurtured our blackness. A lot of persons weren't grown that way.
My mother was telling me that when in her time, I remember them thing that it's they question about England and everything, like them never know that people they were failing. But no, we don't know about England and CSEC examination. Yeah, so it's more trying to come from the Caribbean region. Yeah.
That's 10 points for the Caribbean.
Yeah, but we're still kind of on the
safe to say that chattel slavery impacted the Caribbean even unto this day.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, that's a wrap, guys.
A Rasta no live on no capital land. Oh, you mean? Carry we go home.